Okay, well, guys, welcome to the channel. The preliminary report for Air India Flight 171 is out, and I am live for the first time ever. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit nervous. There's something nerve-wracking about having the stream on YouTube and knowing that like everything you do is just going out live. So you have to bear with me for a second. But the preliminary report is out and it is not good. I would say that it wouldn't be good no matter what. There wasn't a lot of good options left. I would say that. Um, again, let's just go through the report here, and I'm going to go ahead and transition over. I got the report right away, and before I knew it, the entire website had crashed. Thankfully, I had it opened in my browser and it is saved because right now that link to their official prelim report is not working. So let's go ahead and transition over to what we have so far. So it looks to be fairly short, which is normal. I think it was 16, 12 pages. Oh, we got 15 pages. So this is it. It is the report. And by now, I'm sure most of you guys have realized and know what was possibly maybe the worst case scenario. And again, it just gives some basic overview. I don't think we need to review this. What we need to do is go to the part, I think I had it highlighted, but I think it actually took off. And we're going to get to the part that is the most important part of. So we'll start here first. So right here, it says, well, you know what? Sorry, I'm going to just skip over that and continue on to as I said, to the most important part. So it starts here at number 12 listed, and it's going to talk about some of the basic things about the flight. It says the aircraft was scheduled, the crew arrived. I guess they went under with a breathalyzer test right at the time. And it gives you some of the basic things. But here we go is where it gets to what I would say is the bad part. So right here, it says the aircraft achieved a maximum record speed of 180 knots. And this is at 8:08 in 42 seconds. Immediately UTC time. So immediately thereafter, engine 1 and 2 fuel cutoff switches transitioned from run to cutoff position, one after the other with a time gap of 1 second. Okay. So this isn't really much speculation at this point, assuming that this is correct. What they're essentially saying is what we kind of speculated earlier yesterday. We didn't speculate. There was moreover, it was a leaked report, right? The report was that it had to do with the fuel cutoff. And I didn't make a video, and I said I wasn't going to make a video until this came out. That being said, this is exactly what the leaked report said, is that somebody cut the position from run to cut off, and it was a time gap of 1 second. So boom, boom. What they're basically saying is somebody intentionally cut those switches off. Now, if the fuel cutoff switches, if you're unaware, they're just below the throttles, and that basically is it's like the on and off button for the engines, right? With those off, it's all electronically. The switch is manual, but I'm trying to explain for those of you who have never touched a fuel cutoff control switch. I mean, it basically takes 3 fingers to move that thing. It has to be so intentional. You can't flick it down or up. It's basically guarded and trapped where it has to be pulled up and then down. And it has to be very intentional. Sometimes, like, as I said, you need usually minimum 3 fingers to grab that. Like just your finger and your thumb, probably do it, but you really need 3 to fully grab that. So that basically rules out accident. It just does. You did not have an accident here with that. It's what they're saying is it was intentionally cut off. And it says, let's continue on. It says the engine number N1 and N2 became to decrease as their takeoff values and fuel supply in the engines was cut off. This is where it starts to get dark. In the cockpit voice reporting, all it says is, it doesn't say which, it just says one of the pilots is heard asking the other why he did the cutoff. The pilot responded that he did not do so. Okay, so this is weird to me. Why aren't they giving us the like upfront data of which pilot said what? Who was it and why? Did you hear? Because those switches, in my opinion, would be picked up on the CVR, on the cockpit voice recorder. If you move that switch, that CVR, is very delicate. Like you can hear anything. You can hear in the Germanwings accident where the pilot intentionally took the plane to the side of the hill. They actually said you could hear the pilot breathing. That's how sensitive it is. So why are they telling us that the cockpit voice recording is saying one is asked, why'd you cut it off? And the other guy says no. At this point, you would think you would have more answers than questions, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. I was contacted by people that said that the captain had been working very hard to take care of his sick mother. I can't verify this, but the rumor is that the FO was engaged and supposed to get married soon. Now, does that mean you can't have a moment of weakness or whatever? Because this wouldn't be the first time that we've had. And just for the record, I said this in Captain Steve's podcast on Hangar Talk when we talked. I simply mentioned that there's only a few ways that this can happen, right? And one of them was turning off the fuel cutoff shutoff valves or the cutoff switches and just turning them off. And I literally said, without saying anything personal or even indicating anything further than that, I just said, you have to think of Germanwings. So as far as I'm concerned, what I'm seeing here is essentially they're saying, and again, they didn't, as far as I can tell in this report, they're not saying which pilot did it, but because it's not very clear. They're just saying one pilot looked at the other and asked why he cut it off. And the other pilot responded, I did not do so. As I said, there was no good answers for this. But essentially, what this report, as far as I can tell, is saying is one of the pilots intentionally did a murder suicide. That's basically the only thesis you can run from this. But now here's the question. If you actually did do that, is that going to be your actual answer? Like you're going down and this is your intent to take down the plane and to do this, and you're going to do it and say, oh, that wasn't me. Just to be clear on the 787, these fuel control switches, you have to be manually moved. But once that move is done, all the signals after that are electronic. To the FADEC, to the fuel control valves, to everything to that is all electronic. So are we still to assume that it isn't a possibility that there was some type of technical glitch or that the fuel, that something cycled there? I don't know. I don't like this because we don't have enough information here. And that's kind of what I'm seeing. So the progress, let's go down to the progress of the investigation. So both engines were retrieved at the wreckage site and quarantined in the hangar at the airport. Okay, so let's see here. So fuel samples were taken. Again, none of this, the rest, as far as I can tell, makes any difference. It all comes down to this report is to right in here. This is the only thing that matters right now. And exactly what we said, no bird strikes because you would have seen engines, black smoke, you would have heard problems. I just have, as I said, I'm going to go back to full screen here. I just have a little bit of an eerie feeling right here. Something is weird. And again, I've thought about this too. If let's say and it's a scary thing to think, but let's get into the mind of somebody that's just said, hey, this is it. I want to take down this plane. This is what I'm going to do. Cutting the fuel control switches right at takeoff might be the most devastating time. Like you can't, even at 3,000 feet, you could maybe still glide it and save yourself. But the most critical time, right after V1 rotate, you're in the air 200 to 300 feet, you cut those off. I mean, I can't think of a worse time if you're trying to bring down a plane. So that part makes sense. But I just don't understand why. Hey, why'd you cut it off? So maybe he heard it. And then the other guy says, I didn't. Maybe he's lying, right? If you're going to do something that intentional and disturbing, lying, your last little lie on the way out is actually not that big, it's not that far-fetched. But is it possible that there was some type of, all this stuff can be electronically controlled. Is it possible that something else happened? It was sabotage or hacked. And then it just, the switches, the indications were cut off. And the guy says, I don't know what, I didn't do that. That's just what's eerie to me about it. But as far as I can tell, this is the only kind of path they're putting us down. And, to me, it's fair to ask questions. I don't see what's unfair about a company that has been caught in the past. Let me switch back over here. A company that has been caught in the past, lying in the MCAS and the Boeing the 737 Max. They have been caught lying about safety issues. So, again, it's okay to ask questions, but from what we see now, this is what it looks like we're dealing with. It looks like we have another Germanwings incident that was just executed. I shouldn't even use that word. That's the only word I got. This was operated in, it was used as a Germanwings incident, the same thing, but happened in a different way. The Germanwings, if you're unfamiliar, they were flying from, I believe, Barcelona to somewhere in Germany, and the captain went out to use the restroom. The FO locked the door, and because there is an override, locked the door and intentionally crashed the plane into the mountain. So based on what they're saying here, that's what we're dealing with. But as I mentioned, I'll go back to full screen. I think it's okay to ask questions. This, to me, gives a very clear that what this is. Obviously, we're not there looking at this data, so we have to go on what we're shown. But I look at it, and something deep down in my gut just doesn't feel right. And if we're going to go back to the ANA crash in 2019, that 2 engines on landing just uncommandedly shut down. I mean, again, I don't know. I simply don't know. But this is what we have right now on the data, and this is what they're saying, and that's what we have to go with. So, I would be interested to read some comments here and see, what your guys think. But I've already seen some on my channel, and people are saying, I'm not buying it. They're saying, I'm not buying it because it's coming from Boeing. And honestly, can you blame them? I can't. And I just want to read before I end this stream here. I want to go back on this last read through the last part and see if there's anything else that I missed. I only read through it once because this is literally came out. This came out about 30 minutes ago or less. So here is one part. Let me switch back to thing. Like this is an interesting part right here. So it says the flap handle assembly sustained significant thermal damage, and the handle was found to be firmly seated in the 5-degree position. Okay, so that was correct. And it was consistent with a normal takeoff flap setting. Okay. But down here, the thrust lever quadrant sustained significant thermal damage. Both thrust levers were found near idle position. However, let's see here. The thrust levers remained forward until upon impact. Both fuel control switches were found in the run position. So that's what it said before. They basically went back to cutoff, and then they went for run. Obviously, they're run on takeoff. They went cutoff, and within, it looks like 12 seconds, they were back in the run position. But at that point, it was too late. There was nothing that you could do about it. So see, and right here, so you can see they're showing right here, this is the fuel control switches. That's what they look like. They're right below the throttle. And as I mentioned, you need 3 fingers to grab those and move those in any way. Sometimes you could do 2 if you're strong, I guess, but that's what it is. All right, let's get back down here. So the FDR, wow, I'm sorry, guys. I'm shocked. And not only that, this is my first time live, and I'm shocked that this is what it is. But as I mentioned several times before, without trying to pass any blame, nothing was adding up. Nothing was adding up. The odds of 2 engines just shutting down at the same time are just like astronomically low. And let's see here. Let's do this. Let's look into a little bit more about this. So this is talking about the pilots. The flight was to be operated. Okay, so here, both pilots were based in Mumbai and had arrived. And man, I can't ever pronounce that name. I'm just not good at it. On the previous day, they had adequate rest prior to operating that said flight. The co-pilot was pilot flying, and PIC was pilot monitoring for the flight. Okay, so we're back here. I'm just trying to see. I'm just looking through again. This is just released, and I'm live, and I'm just trying to look through here and see everything. So they're saying there's nothing else there. The fuel, they had good fuel. The takeoff weight was within allowable conditions. There were no dangerous goods on the aircraft. Let's see, the taxi to and showed, okay, aircraft. And so, and then again, we're back to this most important part. Here's the thing. Again, this is what they're pointing at, is that this was an intentional, and this was, I mean, just reading the report, I'm gonna be honest. They're basically insinuating that it's a murder-suicide. That being said, is it completely impossible that he spaced out and he just turned him off? I would say 99.999 to the infinite. No, that's not, you can't do that by accident. To grab those, maybe one. There had been a lot of speculation that they had lost one engine and he had reached over and grabbed the wrong fuel control switch out of a panic. Here's my thing. Let's say for some reason, just hypothetical, this is a total hypothetical here. Let's say that you're taking off and the engines roll back and you didn't actually touch those anything. Would you not reach down and maybe try and recycle that or something the same way that we would if you were trying to start a car and it died on you and you're driving on the freeway and you'd go, oh, try and start it again? So here's my thing. Is it possible that there was some type of maintenance issue, glitch that Mary Schiavo had spoken about? The engine's cut off and he reaches down and go, you're out of luck at that point. 400 feet, no engines. At that point, you'd probably try anything. I'd probably try and recycle the fuel, the shutoff, But here's the thing. This is why it's the prelim report. I want to see each second. Every switch in the cockpit that you're up there will show each second when and for how long or when it's pushed. So for example, if the first officer steps on the right rudder, that's going to show up in the FDR data. Just briefly for a second, that input's going to get shown. He steps on the right brake, that is going to be shown. So he holds the brakes for 10 seconds, that's going to be shown. So the reality is we have to see all this data lined up. I want to see exactly who said what, when these switches were switched. Were they switched? Because they did give us this second here. So, right, we'll look here, 180 knots at 8:08 and 42 seconds. That's exactly when the fuel 1 and 2 engine cutoff switches transition from run to cutoff. And then they began to decrease their takeoff values as fuel supply was cut off to the engine. So then the pilot said, one of the pilots, and they don't say who, is asked, why did he cut it off? The other pilot responded, he did not do so. So, and then it talks about here, it says there's no, okay, so here's where I wanted to get down before. Here, okay, this is the most important part of the rest of the piece of the puzzle. Okay, so it says engine 1 fuel cutoff switch transition from cutoff to run about 8:08 and 52 seconds. And which was this number here was 42 seconds. So it took about 10, what they're saying is it took 10 seconds to get that switch back into the run position. Now, this would make sense too. By the way, I guess the one survivor that claimed, what did he claim? He said there was like a glitch and the whole aircraft went dark for a second and then like transitioned. If you cut both engine fuel switches to off, that's 100% what happened. And that would explain why the rats deployed. So what they're saying is at exactly 10 seconds later, they're saying consistent with APU auto start logic, engine 2 fuel cutoff switch also transitioned from cutoff to run. Okay, so 10 and 12 seconds later, they're back into the run position. When fuel control switches are moved from cutoff, here, let me highlight this for you guys. From cutoff to run while the aircraft is in flight, each engine full, so it's just FADEC, and that's basically, so the FADEC basically is like a computer for your engine. It's just monitoring everything. Automatically manages a relight and thrust recovery sequence of an ignition and a fuel introduction. This is what I was talking about before. If you wanted to do something this evil, at 400 feet on takeoff is the time to do it, because I'm not even sure landing, you might still be able to glide in and do this on landing and you still might be able to save the airplane. What they're saying is that it was literally the perfect time to go from cutoff or from run to cutoff. And even though it sounds like they got it back into the run position and the ignited started back up, it was just too late. 10 seconds was all it took for a plane at 400 feet, because we planned for losing one engine. There's almost never been a time when you lose 2 engines at the same time. So let's read down further. The EGT was observed rising for both engines, indicating a relight. Engine's one core deceleration stopped, reversed, and started the progress to recovery. Engine 2 was able to relight but could not arrest core speed deceleration and reintroduced a fuel repeatedly to increased core speed, acceleration, and recovery. And the recording stopped at 8:09 and 11 seconds. And at 8:09 and 5 seconds, one of the pilots transmitted, "Mayday, mayday, mayday." Did not get any further response. Okay, and so the last thing is 8:14:44 crashed in. Sorry, I'm just, again, this is live, guys. Sorry, I'm just trying to go through it. Okay, as far as I'm concerned, this here, the progress of the investigation, we're not getting it. What do you guys think? What is your thoughts? I mean, this clearly points to something very terrible, and I don't know what's worse, but this is probably one of the worst scenarios we could have got. As I said, I was hopeful it wasn't this because, as I said, I had talked to people. Captain was a good guy, known for being a good guy, taking care of his mom. The FO was apparently engaged and supposed to get married in a couple months. I will speak to Captain Steve just did a video earlier today, and I will speak to what he's talking about is that there is a big push for mental health and problems in the industry when it comes to pilots and their ability to get help for mental health. I have no idea what it's like over in India, but I know that the culture here is, here, let me go back full screen just before I end this. The culture here is very bad. It's the problem is the FAA forces pilots to go underground and either self-medicate or suppress their problems and not get treatment or help that they need. Now, listen, before, I'm not going to be one of those people that's just like anything goes. I understand the FAA has to draw some lines, and it's like you can't let somebody that's like mentally unstable up there flying the planes. Totally get that. But right now, it's a system set up that is basically punishes you if you were to get help. And, so Captain Steve did a very good video on that, talking about that. I do think there is a big culture shift in that, and that is coming like quickly, which would be good because, again, you'd have to ask the question, right? What would you rather have? Somebody that goes off and gets help and comes back once they're better, or somebody that, man, I'm going to lose my job. I can't pay my mortgage. I can't pay there. And just keeps forcing it underground, until something potentially like this happens. So I'd be curious to know your thoughts, guys. This was my first live stream. Let me know what you thought. I've never done one of these. Not the report we were looking for, but again, at least for now, based on this info, I feel safe being on a Boeing. I think you should too, because again, if this info is correct, this had nothing to do with the Boeing plane. It just didn't. And so, but we're going to keep an eye on it. We got to hold people accountable. I am somebody that's lied before, that has huge financial incentives to, to lie. I think that and has lied in the past. I think that that's a reasonable thing to not just accept blindly what we're given and to ask questions and to demand answers. So I appreciate you guys watching, and